I want to be clear.
Okay,
I'm not
let's say
saying that
some
Bilal was dragged in,
damn
kicking and
shit.
screaming to Jacob's bed and
Street whore.
forced against her will in some horrific scene of sexual
From
assault.
China?
I'm sure that on some level, Bilal went willingly on this because in her situation,
She sucked.
there was probably nothing better that could come of her than
Suck
to
my slut.
bear the child of the master and hope
Yeah,
all would
fuck
go
that
well.
goddamn shit.
But as we've already seen in this text, in the Bible itself, this absolutely does not always
want
go
a
well
goddamn
because this is the
game. I
same
want
crap
fucking
that Sarah
50
pulled
fucking
with Hagar
God,
and
son of a
Abraham.
bitch.
And as soon as Sarah finally managed to
Start the
conceive a
God
kid of
fucking
her
game, you
own, what did she
goddamn son
do
of a
with Hagar
goddamn bitch,
and Ishmael?
goddamn it.
She booted them out the house and left them to die. So if you don't think that giving your servant to your husband to become his concubine is some form of sexual assault, then you have the moral compass
suck
of
my
a
dick,
5-year-old. Then Rachel said, God has judged
The
me and has
5-year-olds
also
haven't
heard
been
my
with
voice and
my
given me a
dad.
son. Therefore she named him Dan. Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again
Start the
and bore
God
Jacob a
fucking
second
game, you
son.
goddamn.
Then Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed. So she named him Naphtali, which...
You please play start the God fucking damn game, goddamn son of a goddamn bitch.
How is that prevailing against your sister? The sad idea that you're fighting with your sister somehow to squeeze out more kids is, first of all, disgusting. But even if we accept that depressing idea, I still don't know how she thinks that she's prevailed. She has still not born any children of her own. The children that were born from her, in theory, by extension, through Bilhah, are still fewer than the children that Leah's born. So if we just want to count them up, like it's a scorecard, she's behind Leah. If we want to be very literal about this, she still hasn't born any kids herself. It's really sad the way this whole thing plays out. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her maid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Then Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Okay, let's drink again for sexual assault. Yes. And again, if you don't think that's sexual assault, you should really grow the hell up. Because this is a disgusting story.
You suck my dick, bitch.
It's not enough that Rachel
Suck my
wants
dick,
to give her servant to Jacob as a proxy for her to have kids, but then Leah, after she's already squeezed out some puppies, said, oh my gosh, now I have
You
to keep
suck my
up. So she now does the same thing with Zilpah. And again, I don't know what Zilpah's condition was, and I don't know what her mindset was, but the simple fact is that Zilpah, like Bilhah, has no agency in this transaction. They are being handed around like cattle to be impregnated at will so that someone else can feel better about scoring points with their virtual children. And Leah said, good fortune, so she named him Gad. Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, and Leah said, you stupid bitch, for the women will call me happy, so she named him Asher. In the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? Rachel said, then he may lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. Then he may lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. When Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. So he lay with her that night, and God heeded Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. So drink, everyone, to prostitution. Oh yeah.
Suck my dick, bitch.
Normally we're thinking of prostitution the other way, as a man paying for services, but this is absolutely Leah, Jacob's own wife, so sadly paying for services with mandrakes. How pitiful is that?
You suck my dick, bitch.
Again, I guess has a lazy eye or something to that effect. Has to essentially buy some dick from her husband with mandrakes that she got from her son. That is so sad and so disgusting. But it's absolutely prostitution. And could you imagine that with mandrakes that she got from her son? Dick from her to that effect.
Dick
has to essentially buy some dick from her husband with...
Suck my dick, you're boring as fuck, you son of a bitch. Oh, I see what it is. God.
Hey there, you magnificent bastards. Welcome back to Skepticus, the only place where we ask the really uncomfortable questions, usually while sipping something strong and trying not to offend too many deities. Well,
suck my fucking dick.
And okay, maybe it's not the only place asking really uncomfortable questions,
suck my fucking dick.
I'm kind of feeling myself today, so what the hell? If you've been following or subscribing, you might have noticed that this morning I posted a video that's a response to Frank Turek's hate-filled rant about the LGBT community and apparently how he thinks that they should judge everyone all the time because that's what Christian love is all about. But it got me to thinking about how Christianity and monotheism in general creates a type of ingrained exclusionary system. You see, if you are a Christian,
goddamn fucking
or
Christ,
a member of any monotheistic religion, but seeing how I live in the American South, I'm going to keep this mostly about Christians. Have you ever stopped to think about how your beliefs, whatever they may be, actually shape the way that you see the rest of the world? I mean, really dig into it. Because today we're going to be poking a bit of a sleeping bear. Maybe even a fire-breathing one if the ancient texts are to be believed. As I said, we're going to be digging into Christianity. And before anyone grabs their pitchforks or starts firing off emails in all caps, just hear me out on this one for a second. This is not a hate fest. This is more of an observation. A slightly irreverent, hopefully thought-provoking observation about something that's kind of baked right into the very foundations of faith itself. Something that, if you squint at it just the right way, can look a little like, well, bigotry.
Move, you fucking
Now, I know that's a spicy word. Bigotry. It conjures up images of hate rallies and discriminatory laws. While those things are certainly fueled by bigotry, can also be a little more subtle, a little more default. And that's where I want to start our little exploration today. Think back to a time before everyone and their dog, literally, maybe, was claiming allegiance to one God and one God only. Imagine a world filled with pantheons, with local deities looking after specific rivers or forests, with a whole celestial bureaucracy of divine beings. Cultures like the Romans, for instance. They had their own gods, sure, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, etc., all the usual suspects. But when they encountered other cultures with their own set of deities, well, they didn't necessarily say, your gods are all fake. Often, they just sort of incorporate them. Oh, you worship a sky god named Thor. That's interesting. Our Jupiter handles the thunder. Maybe they're just different flavors of the same cosmic thing. It was kind of like a divine potluck, everyone bringing their own dish to the celestial table. Now, there were practical aspects to this, of course. A lot of this was about keeping the conquered populations in line. And if you want to keep those conquered populations as docile as possible, it's probably not a good idea to tell them that you are disavowing all of their pre-existing gods. But whether it was for political gain or whether it was just a matter of being sort of open-minded, cultures like the Romans, specifically cultures that relied on polytheistic beliefs, weren't so fast just to throw everyone else's beliefs out the window. But then comes along this new kid on the block, monotheism. Kind of sounds like some disease you get in school, but we'll leave that one alone. One God to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them. Sounds pretty epic, right? Like the ultimate power move in the deity department. But here's the rub. If you're saying that there's only one God, what does that inherently imply about all the other gods people are worshiping?
Suck my
We'll get to that uncomfortable conclusion in just a minute, trust me. It involves a lot less divine potluck and a lot more cosmic smackdown. So you've got these early monotheists, the folks laying the groundwork for what would become Christianity and,
man, this is boring as fucking shit.
And Islam, for that matter. So they were just saying, hey, we think our God is the real deal, or we think he's superior. They were going a step further. Actually, a really
stupid, stupid.
They were saying that everyone else's gods? Nada. Zilch. Non-existent. Not just wrong, not just inferior, mind you, but utterly and completely fake. Now, let me give you a personal anecdote here. I used to run a business. We had offices in the U.S. and in India. I had a business partner, wonderful gentleman. He is Belgian. He's a Christian. And he's a big fan of Freemasonry. He's been a Freemason his entire life, and he just gets a lot of value from it. And being European, he told me one day, we were having a discussion, he said, you know, when we talk to Americans, there's Freemasonry in America. He said, often Americans have a much greater aversion to Freemasonry, and he couldn't figure out why. And I chuckled, and I said, George, I can tell you exactly why. Because the people that don't want to hear about Freemasonry in the U.S. are almost certainly Christian. They're probably evangelical Christian. And they see Freemasonry as some kind of insidious plot from the devil. Now, George, being this wonderful, open-minded guy, didn't understand this. He said, how can that be? Because when you go into the Freemason Lodge, there is this podium up there, and they make you take an oath when you first join. And they say, in the oath, you have to believe in some higher being. They don't say which one. They don't nail you down. They just say you're supposed to believe in some higher being. And they have on the podium a Talmud, and a Bible, and a Quran. And poor George, he's so naive in a wonderful way. He said, how could this be a problem for Christians? Like, we're accepting. We say that you have to believe in a God. We allow all religious thinkers to come and be members. But I said, that's just it, George. For many Christians, especially American Christians, especially American evangelical Christians, it's not enough to say that you believe in a God. You have to affirm their God. It's not enough to say that you like the Bible or that you believe in the Christian God. You have to say that all other gods are false. And the fact that you have a Bible on the same table with the Quran, on the same table with the Talmud, for many Christians, again, especially American evangelical Christians, they find that to be offensive because it's not enough for them to have their faith affirmed. You have to also trash everyone else's faith. Imagine that you're a painter. Let's say that you're an impressionist painter, happily dabbing away at your water lilies. And you meet a cubist painter who doesn't just prefer sharp angles and fragmented perspectives. He tells you that impressionism isn't just not as good as cubism. He tells you that impressionism isn't even real art. Your beautiful, light-filled canvases, they're illusions, they're deceptions. And to top it all off, he hints that your dedication to these flimsy impressionistic techniques might just land you in some serious artistic hot water somewhere down the line. How would that make you feel? Would you suddenly see the genius of all those Picasso portraits? Probably not. You'd likely think that this person was a bit of a, well, you can fill in the blank. And you sure as hell wouldn't be excited to go adopting his form of painting after he's basically insulted yours and told you that it's non-existent. And this is where the inherent exclusion of monotheism starts to feel a little prickly. It's not enough to say, we believe this. It often comes with the not-so-subtle or sometimes very blatant message that everyone who believes something different is, at best, misguided. And at worst, they're heading straight for the fiery furnace of eternal torment. Now, speaking of fiery furnaces, that's where this thing gets even less cozy. It's one thing to say that someone's God is fake. It's another thing entirely to tell them that because of this
you suck my dick, bitch.
They are destined for eternal conscious
You suck my
torment.
dick, bitch.
Think about that for a second. You've lived your whole life, followed the traditions that you were raised in, worshipped the deity or deities that your culture reviews, maybe even lived a pretty decent life by most metrics. And then, bam, surprise! Your deeply held beliefs weren't just incorrect. They've earned you a one-way ticket to unending eternal agony. Does that sound fair? Does that sound like the behavior of a loving, all-forgiving deity? Or does it sound more like the ultimate cosmic punishment for not subscribing to the right brand of belief? And we'll unpack that moral quandary a bit later, especially when we delve into the Old Testament's rather enthusiastic approach to divine justice. But let's just say that Yahweh isn't exactly known for his gentle diplomacy. But this isn't just about abstract theological disagreements.
Suck my dick,
this exclusionary nature of Christianity has real-world consequences. If you genuinely believe that anyone outside your faith is not only wrong, but also doomed to hell, how does that shape your interactions with them? Does it foster understanding and empathy? Or does it create a divide and us versus them mentality where the them are seen as inherently flawed, their beliefs a dangerous delusion? I'll let you ponder that one while we take a little detour into the rather colorful history of the Christian God.
Suck my dick.
Now, we can't talk about potential bigotry without digging into the source material, right? When you crack open the Old Testament, you find a deity who, well, let's just say that he had some very specific preferences and he wasn't afraid to play favorites. And when I say play favorites, I mean on a national, even genocidal scale. Yahweh's relationship with the Israelites is, let's just say, intense. It's like that friend who's fiercely loyal to their inner circle but couldn't care less about anyone else. Except, in this case, the friend is an all-powerful being with the ability to unleash plagues, part seas, and command armies. And he wasn't exactly shy about using those powers on behalf of his chosen people, often at the expense of, well, pretty much everyone else. But it goes deeper than that. There's also the wonderful issue of multi-generational curses. Yeah, Yahweh is a big fan of those. The idea that the sins of the father and mothers, although they often get less blame in these stories, that they could be visited upon their descendants for generations. And that's directly from the top, from the big guy. It's a concept that flies in the face of pretty much any modern understanding of justice and individual responsibility. But hey, who are we to question divine judgment, right? Especially when that judgment conveniently falls upon your enemies. And speaking of enemies, the Old Testament is rife with examples of Yahweh explicitly endorsing, even commanding some pretty horrific acts against non-Hebrew populations. Genocide? Check. Slavery? Absolutely, with detailed instructions on how to properly own another human being, including how to beat them. Forced sexual servitude? Sadly, that makes an appearance too. The justification?
You stupid whore.
Part of the chosen tribe. They worshipped the wrong gods, who, remember, according to the core tenets of the faith, didn't actually exist anyway. But even though they were worshipping supposedly gods that don't even exist, they were still going to be brutally punished for worshipping these imaginary gods. So apparently, they were just in the way. They were collateral damage in Yahweh's grand plan. Now, the standard Christian response to these uncomfortable passages is often a bit of a rhetorical tap dance. They might say that it was a different time, that God's ways are mysterious, or that these stories are meant to be interpreted allegorically, except, of course, when they're used to justify their own moral stances on issues, and then they're supposed to be taken hyper-literally. But the fact remains, these stories are there, in their holy book, depicting their God as explicitly favoring one group and sanctioning violence and oppression against others, simply based on their ethnicity or religious affiliation. And here, back to the central point, is where the potential for modern-day bigotry truly creeps in. If your own deity, the ultimate moral authority in your worldview, is portrayed as engaging in this kind of tribalism and violence, doesn't that inadvertently create a framework for justifying similar us versus them thinking in the present day? It becomes awfully easy for unscrupulous leaders to demonize any group that they don't like, to paint them as the modern-day equivalent of the Canaanites or the Philistines, the outsiders deserving of God's and therefore apparently our wrath.
Stupid buck.
The groundwork for exclusion and prejudice is just kind of baked in right into the divine narrative itself. Think about it. If God himself drew such stark lines between the in-group and the out-group, isn't it tempting for believers to do the exact same thing? To see the world through a similar lens of divine favor and disfavor? It's a powerful and potentially dangerous framework. Now, at the risk of sounding a little vindicated, I have to admit that I watched the reaction of certain segments of Christianity to the LGBTQIA+ rights movement over the past couple of decades with a certain grim fascination. Because on this particular issue, a lot of the usual theological tap dancing becomes considerably more difficult. For so many other morally dubious aspects of Christian history, there are well-worn talking points that are designed to smooth over the rough edges. The Bible endorses slavery? No. Christians were the ones who ended slavery, which is a highly selective and historically inaccurate claim, but hey, it's out there. Yahweh ordered genocide? Well, that was in the Old Testament. And Jesus preached peace and love, conveniently ignoring the fire and brimstone that Jesus also seemed to be quite fond of. But hey, who's keeping track? The church has a long history of misogyny? Well, you're just misinterpreting the text. Husbands are commanded to love their wives, while wives are commanded to obey their husbands, but I guess let's not get bogged down in the details. But when it comes to the issue of homosexuality and LGBTQIA+ rights in general, the escape routes become considerably narrower. Sure, there are increasingly progressive denominations and congregations who have chosen to embrace and affirm the LGBTQIA+ community. And that's a wonderful thing. But there are still vast numbers of churches, influential Christian leaders, and entire denominations who have vehemently rejected gay rights, often citing specific passages in the Bible as their justification. And here's the kicker. Their scripture, taken literally, does in fact seem to support them in this. Those Old Testament condemnations of abominations and the New Testament passages that seem to frown upon same-sex relations are pretty explicit, at least on the surface. So while they might try to soften the rhetoric with talk of loving the sinner, hating the sin, the underlying message remains. These desires, these identities, are inherently wrong in the eyes of their God. People who are born this way are inherently wrong in the eyes of the creature or the deity that created them. Think about the logical contortion here. If God is the one who created every human being, with all of their inherent desires and inclinations, he counted all the hairs on your head, then why would he create an entire group of people with same-sex attractions only to condemn them for acting on those very desires? It's like building a car with a steering wheel and then telling the driver that they're going to hell if they try to make a turn. It doesn't exactly scream divine plan, now does it? It sounds more like, well, bigotry, dressed up in fancy theological language. And the consequences of this theological stance are very real and very tangible. It's not just about denying gay couples the right to marry or adopt. It fuels discrimination in housing, employment, and healthcare. It leads to the ostracization of LGBTQIA+ individuals from their families and communities. And tragically, it contributes to a climate of fear and self-loathing that has devastating mental health consequences. All because a group of people are daring to love and build lives with others of the same sex. A fundamental aspect of the human experience that, in a more inclusive worldview, would simply be accepted and even celebrated. It's also worth noting how incredibly easy it is to discriminate against those whose experiences you've never even shared. It's easy to cast judgment on gay people when you've never felt a flicker of same-sex attraction yourself. Or if you have and it embarrassed you and you've been beating it into the closet ever since. It's easy to tell followers of other religions that they're doomed when you've been raised from birth in a deeply Christian environment, never truly questioning the foundations of your own faith. It's easy to act like a righteously indignant, well, you know, when your holy book provides you with ample examples of your own deity behaving in ways that, if a human did them, we certainly condemn. Ultimately, this isn't about saying every Christian is a bigot. That's a lazy and inaccurate generalization. There are countless Christians who are deeply compassionate, inclusive, and actively working to combat prejudice in all of its forms. But the inherent structure of the faith itself, its claim to exclusive truth, and the often troubling portrayals of deity in Scripture create a fertile ground for exclusionary thinking and, at its worst, outright bigotry. So the next time that you encounter someone who not only believes that they have the one true faith, but also seems awfully keen to tell you why your beliefs are wrong and potentially damnable, maybe take a step back and consider the roots of that conviction. Consider the inherent bias that is baked into a system that claims exclusive access to divine truth. And maybe, just maybe, suggest that they take a moment to reflect on whether their certainty is truly a sign of divine favor or simply a consequence of a worldview that by its very nature struggles to see the validity and worth in anything outside of its own tightly drawn lines. It's a conversation that's worth having, even if it's a little uncomfortable. Because understanding the potential for exclusion and prejudice within any belief system, including Christianity, is the first step towards building a more inclusive and compassionate world. And who knows?
You suck my
maybe,
goddamn motherfucking
just maybe,
bitch.
The divine potluck isn't entirely off the table after all. We'll save that theological debate for another time, though. For now, keep questioning, keep thinking, and as always, lo, I say unto you, stay skeptical.
You suck my dick, bitch.
All right, this one was fun. Coming up, they had fame, they had the fans, they had it all. Till one decision brought it all crashing down. You love the first one, so here's part two, counting down the most infamous self-inflicted wounds in rock history. Career-killing choices that left fans stunned and musicians really on the wrong side of rock history. Some of these are full-on swan dives into disaster. I mean, one rookie hitmaker got taken down by both fans and critics after he boasted that his debut album was better than the greatest album of all time. Can you guess the album and the artist? Another musician was making $30 million a year, but he couldn't figure out his musical identity and then he spent himself into bankruptcy. He went from an album that sold 18 million copies to one that sold 1,000. That's right, 1,000 copies. Then there was a band who overhyped themselves so much that one fan started a grassroots campaign to destroy him, and it worked. Finally, there was a band that fired a machine gun on stage and then literally burned the equivalent of $1.5 million as a PR stunt. Today, we're sifting through the wreckage to bring you the stories of the dumbest decisions of the rock era. Coming up next on Professor of Rock, brought to you by American Financing. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember Mr. T Cereal, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. I love how Pee Wee did that. Make sure to subscribe below right now. I know you'll find something in this channel. Click on the white button, click on the bell. Also, check out our podcast on Apple and Spotify. So we did this once before, and you loved it, and I got so many requests that we're going to do a part 2. Today, we count down the most boneheaded decisions in rock history. Now, those moments where artists and bands decided to basically just light their career on fire or straight up jump off a cliff. Here are the top 6 examples of what not to do if you want to make it in the music business. Legendary blunders that taint careers and left all of us fans wondering what the hell are they thinking. All right, at number 6, you're going to be shocked at who I'm including here because they're one of my favorite bands. I'm sure a lot of you love them out there, but bear with me on why they're here. The Alan Parsons Project at number 6.
I remember that song. God fucking damn
it. A band that could have been so much bigger, and really the only reason I'm including them on this list is because they made a strategic choice to be a studio band, and so did Steely Dan to a point. But I mean, they had the talent, and they were completely brilliant, but refusing to tour cost them a shot at true rock immortality, let me tell you. They're probably okay with that, really. But I can't help but wonder if the Alan Parsons Project had hit the road with the right front man, we might be talking about them in the same breath as some of the greatest of the 70s, like Pink Floyd. I mean, Alan Parsons was that great. Of course, he engineered The Dark Side of the Moon, so there's that. His connection to Pink Floyd and genius. In the landscape of 70s and 80s rock, obviously live performances were essential for his visibility and longevity. Touring drove record sales, fueled media exposure, and helped bands to capitalize on radio play. For the most successful acts of that era, hitting the road was how you built a tribe of loyal fans. However, the Alan Parsons Project made a different choice altogether. They opted to remain a studio-only band, and their decision had real commercial consequences. While groups like Pink Floyd and Rush used elaborate stage shows to secure their global reputations, the Alan Parsons Project stayed out of sight. Okay, here's the deal. The project sold millions of records, but their refusal to tour kept them from becoming a cultural touchstone. These other bands became because of that fan base. At the core of the anti-tour philosophy was vocalist and pianist Eric Woolfson. The band's co-founder, co-songwriter, and part-time lead vocalist. Woolfson was one of the band's driving engines for sure. He also played keyboards on nearly every track, and he sang lead on a lot of APP's most recognizable hits, like Eye in the Sky, Time, and Don't Answer Me. But here's the thing, he preferred anonymity. And while Alan Parsons also favored the studio, it was Eric's deep resistance to public exposure that closed the door on touring altogether.
Come on,
This stance became even more problematic, when the rise of MTV happened in the early 80s. I mean, suddenly music needed to be visual for everybody. Many MTV videos at the time relied heavily on footage of bands performing live or being in the video. APP simply wasn't built for that format. But the Alan Parsons Project had no clear frontman and no charismatic figure to film. So the band didn't really capitalize on MTV's reach and really couldn't. It left them invisible to an entire generation glued to the screen. The project's sound wasn't incompatible with visual storytelling at all. Far from it. Their music was more cinematic than most bands out there, and they even tried their hand at an animated music video, Don't Answer Me, but it just wasn't enough. The band lacked a consistent visual presence, and without tours to fill that gap, they faded from the cultural foreground by the mid-'80s. I think they could have been so much bigger. Eric Wolfson's reclusive personality, while critical to the creative integrity of Alan Parsons' project, also made it difficult to adjust to the promotional demands of the 80s. His desire to remain private kept him away from interviews and performances and public appearances. These were vital for the band to get out there.
Stupid.
This wasn't rock star burnout, though. It was an intentional lifestyle choice for him. Wolfson saw the Alan Parsons Project as a vehicle for ideas and sound, not for celebrity. Had the band embraced touring even briefly, especially in the late 70s when albums like I, Robot and The Turn of a Friendly Car gained traction and were so great, being played everywhere, they could have expanded their fan base dramatically.
Suck my fucking dick.
Now, when Parsons launched the Alan Parsons Live project in the 90s without Wolfson, the shows drew crowds and praise, and it proved that there was always demand for the material. But by the time Alan Parsons took the music to the stage, the MTV boom was long gone and the band's peak momentum had passed. But still, the response to those later live shows revealed what could have been truly. With strategic touring and stronger video presence, the Alan Parsons Project might have seen an 80s explosion. Instead, they remained a respected but semi-detached presence in rock history. Truly brilliant, but truly distant. And it's so sad, because they're amazing. I love Alan Parsons.
Suck my dick, bitch.
Okay, our number 5 pick is really interesting. It's a band, you gotta remember these guys, some people probably won't, but it's a band called Primitive Radio Gods, with their song Standing Outside a Broken Phone Booth with Money in My Hand.
I remember that song.
Primitive Radio Gods was the stage. Broken phone booth with money in my hand.
Spit smell.
Primitive Radio Gods was the stage name of a single musician, Chris O'Connor. Similar to the first Foo Fighters album where Dave Grohl recorded 98% of the record on his own, but wanted to have the appearance of being in a band, right? Chris O'Connor, for his part, never aspired to be famous at all. That's the only explanation I can think of what went down when he scored a #1 hit on the modern rock charts. Prior to his record deal and this hit, O'Connor, he was way off the map. He spent the 80s and early 90s playing with the Irish, an indie band based in Santa Monica. They released 4 independent discs before breaking up in obscurity. After that, Chris isolated himself in his friend's garage with a Tascam 388 and learning how to use a sampling keyboard. So there's that. Now the result was good. It was the album Rocket, which he virtually solo created. He did the writing, he did the producing, even mixed each track. When it was finished, there was no interest in it, so he just moved on and landed a job as an air traffic controller.
I'm talking about myself because I almost.
But in 1994, Chris decided to give it another shot. So he made 500 CDs and he sent them out to radio stations and small labels. One ended up with a guy named Jonathan Daniel, an A&R rep, who knew right away that Phone Booth was a special song. He presented it to Columbia Records, who signed O'Connor under the name Primitive Radio Gods.
Bring this poem out here, please. I'm fixing to eat your breath.
And just like that, overnight, a 5-year-old song became an alternative rock smash. And this song was so big. Now, this is thanks in large part to its appearance in The Cable Guy with Jim Carrey. Remember that movie? The standing outside a broken phone booth with money in my hand, a very long time indeed, I might add, sounded like nothing else playing on radio in 1996. Lo-fi samples, church bells, analog synthesizers, and a chopped B.B. King hook. It was at the same time new and old.
I remember.
The song never hit the Hot 100 because it just was never made as a mainstream single, but it did peak at number 10 on the Airplay chart, went to number 7 on the Billboard Top 40, and as I mentioned before, it was number 1 on the mainstream rock charts and the modern rock charts. So it was a smash. It was all over the place. So I guess the question is, what do you do after scoring a #1 hit on your first try? Most musicians would be psyched and ready to take things to the next level. But Chris O'Connor took a sharp left turn. His follow-up single had a 0% chance of having any commercial success, and O'Connor knew it. The reason is, the second single was named Mother Blankety Blank. Not exactly a radio-friendly title. The name alone guaranteed 0 radio spin, 0 MTV rotation, and 0 shot at financial success. Again, this was 96. Lyrically, the song only used the F-bomb a couple times, but in terms of subject matter, it was a fear. Again, this was 96. Lyrically, the song only used the F-bomb a couple times, but in terms of subject matter, it was a furious anti-establishment rant. Not exactly made for appealing to the masses, and the worst part is, he did it on purpose. The follow-up single was a deliberate shunning of the spotlight for sure. Total self-sabotage. There were other signs that it was no accident, though. Unsurprisingly, Columbia Records pushed for a different single, but O'Connor insisted that the Mother Blanker had to be the official follow-up, uncensored. And a media landscape terrified of FCCC fines and moral outrage, really. The song was doomed from the start. I mean, the message was loud and clear. I don't want your fame. And you know what? It worked perfectly. Primitive Radio Gods never scored another charting single and soon after faded into obscurity.
I can't believe how fucked up that is.
I mean, in an interview years later, Chris O'Connor called his fleeting experience with superstardom music industry, I can't say the word on here, RAPE. Music industry RAPE. And he claimed in response that he burned all bridges in relationships. O'Connor continued making music his own way, recording more albums in peace and shadows. No hype, no touring, no comeback. That's just the way he wanted it. Cool. Let me mention today's sponsor. You know, what if you could delay your next 2 mortgage payments? I mean, how great would that be? Imagine putting those 2 payments into your pocket and finally getting a little financial break. Now, this is all possible when you call American Financing today. I mean, most Americans are putting everyday expenses like gas, groceries, and other bills on credit cards. Once it doesn't seem to be a way out. American Financing can show you how to use your home's equity to pay off that debt. Call American Financing before you get to a point where you simply can't make those payments. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you restructure loans and consolidate debt. All about 80 upfront fees. Customers of American Financing are saving an average of $800 a month. That's like a $10,000 raise. It's a fast, simple process. You could really save your budget this summer. Call before you fall into that hole. 866-890-4844. That's 866-890-4844. Or visit AmericanFinancing.net/ProfessorRock. Coming in at number 4, I've got an artist that probably wouldn't be featured on this channel under any other circumstance, really. Stanley Kirk Burrell, a.k.a. MC Hammer.
Suck my dick.
Can't touch this. This one's actually more than just one bad decision that killed the career. It's more like a laundry list that he checked off. So in 1990, MC Hammer was on top of the music world, right? Powered by the mega hit, You Can't Touch This. His album, Please Hammer, Don't Hurt Him. I mean, that thing sold over 18 million copies worldwide, making him the first hip-hop artist to go diamond. Actually, You Can't Touch This wasn't even its biggest hit. It actually peaked at number 8. It's the most memorable from the album, for sure. But his next 2 singles, Have You Seen Her, Remake, and Pray, they went to number 4 and number 2 respectively. With flashy dance moves, oversized parachute pants that everybody was wearing back then, and that larger-than-life stage presence, MC Hammer became a pop culture phenomenon for a couple of years. I mean, think about it. At his peak, he was earning $30 million a year. $30 million! From records and tours and merch and endorsements. He even had his own Saturday morning cartoon, Hammerman. I mean, everybody remembers that one. But Hammer's huge commercial appeal sparked a backlash in the shifting hip-hop landscape where he was accused of selling out for his pop-friendly sound. And it's true, I mean, he had a pop-friendly sound. Everybody had this album.
Damn it.
I mean, it sold 18 million copies. Many of you listening to this probably going to admit that you had it, and I have a hard time admitting it. I got it for my birthday from my parents one year. I think my mom bought it. My dad knew I wasn't into this kind of music. I wasn't into it. I may have listened to it a few times. All right, I listened to it. I mean, who hasn't sung along to "You Got to Pray Just to Make It Today"? And it helped, that it had the sample from Prince's "When Doves Cry," and he, of course, sampled a lot of people. But again, after getting criticized for selling out, Hammer attempted to regain credibility, so he dropped the MC from his name, and he released Too Legit to Quit. Too legit to shit.
Too legit to shit.
That was in 91. The album went triple platinum, spawned the hit title track, but he couldn't match the frenzy of his debut. By 92, overexposure had set in. For his 94 album, The Funky Headhunter, Hammer leaned on harder beats and tried to reinvent himself with a tougher image. Crazy enough, this record actually went platinum, but many fans saw this sudden turn as inauthentic, especially after the awkward Pumps and a Bump video, which MTV banned from daytime rotation. Hammer's decline accelerated with 1995's Inside Out, which was a New Jack Swing influence album that peaked at just 119 on the Billboard 200. This led Giant Records to drop him. Now, he looked for a career boost by signing to Death Row Records, working on an album titled Too Tight, and he was collaborating with Tupac Shakur. But Tupac's 1996 killing and chaos at Death Row prompted Hammer to walk away from this. He actually returned to his spiritual roots with 1998's Family Affair. It was a faith-focused double album released on EMI. And now he was an ordained minister, and he promoted on Christian TV. And it sold 1,000 away from this. He actually returned to his spiritual roots with 1998's Family Affair. It was a faith-focused double album released on EMI. And now he was an ordained minister, and he promoted on Christian TV. And it sold 1,000 copies worldwide. 1,000 copies. Staggering drop from the 18 million Please Hammer Don't Hurt Him move earlier in the decade. It's crazy. Now, a major factor in Hammer's downfall was financial mismanagement. At his peak, he built a 40,000 square foot mansion with gold-plated gates and a recording studio and a pool that I guess cost $500,000 a year just to maintain. He actually employed like 200 people and spent lavishly in cars and jewelry and private jets and his entourage. And then sales tanked and his expenses became unsustainable. By 96, Hammer was $13 million in debt and he filed for bankruptcy. He would later admit that his priorities were out of order, way out of order. He had too much money and not enough sense, his words. His spectacular rise and fall became a pop culture cautionary tale about fame and excess. But he emerged from the 90s with a new purpose, no longer chasing hits, but life lessons. So there's that. Coming in at number 3, I've got the Renegade Hitmakers, the KLF, a chaos-cloaked duo who stormed the charts to become the biggest selling singles act on the planet in 1991, only to torch their own success in a ritualistic, career-ending spectacle. All right, so our story starts in a
with Spitster
in a ritualistic, career-ending spectacle. All right, so our story starts in the late 80s where Bill Drummond and Jimmy Cotty first joined forces as the Justified Ancients of Moo Moo, or the Jams. In their early pop experiments, they lifted chunks from Beatles and Samantha Fox, even ABBA. Now, when ABBA's lawyers came calling over an unauthorized sample, the Jam drove to Sweden, and upon failing to meet, the band burned piles of their outlawed records in a field. Reinvention came next. These guys are crazy. This is funny. They took the alias to Time Lords and set out to hijack the UK pop charts. In 1988, they released Doctor and the TARDIS, a mashup of the Doctor Who theme and glam rock riffs. It hit number 1 in the UK and it sold over 1 million copies and crowned the duo as novelty kings. But they weren't done yet. Next, they emerged as the KLF, short for Copyright Liberation Front. Their underground club cut What Time Is Love crashed into the UK top 5 in 1990. And then came the big one. January 1991 to 3 a.m. Eternal. That shot to number 1 in the UK and cracked the US top 5.
You stupid motherfucker.
Most people don't realize this, but by the end of that year, they had outsold every other singles act on Earth. They beat out Michael Jackson, even Nirvana. The KLF kept the fire going with Last Train to Trans Central and their chart-climbing album, The White Room. And then in a move that nobody saw coming, they teamed up with country legend Tammy Wynette for the twangy, techno, twang oddity, Justified and Ancient. Maybe one of the strangest songs of the last 30 years or so. It went top 10 in the US, hit number 2 in the UK, and it reached number 1 in...
You suck my dick, bitch.
Hello and welcome back to God-Free Bible Study. I'm Boy, Adam Nola. Today we're going through Genesis 34 through 37. Before we get started, I want to give you a scorecard so you can keep track home. Today we're looking for instances of endless retellings, foreskin follies, jumped the shark, offspring coercion, overkill, polytheism, pointless lineage, sexual assault, split personality, and worthless word. I highly recommend you load up on some happy juice, because sober Bible reading is a sad Bible reading. Ain't no one wants something like that. So getting into Genesis 34 starts on a very dour note. The heading is literally the rape of Dinah. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had born to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the region. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the region, saw her, he seized her and lay with her by force. Yes, unfortunately, our first social is not a happy one. It is for sexual assault. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Give me this girl to be my wife." If ever you need evidence that this book is written by ancient old Hebrew men who have disgusting patriarchal ideas of sex and how women are treated, all you have to do is read this. They start off strong by admitting that Shechem had raped her. But then it says, and his soul was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. Ew! That is so gross.
God damn it.
Why would you even put that in the text?
God,
even if that was the behavior of Shechem, that's disgusting. And that is the action of an incel. And to think they would add this narrative just proves the man who wrote this book, or if you want to go here, the God who wrote this book, has no idea how sexual assault plays out and the toll takes on people, especially women. Now Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his cattle in the field. So Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him, just as the sons of Jacob came in from the field. When they heard of it, the men were indignant and very angry, because he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. Once again, the narrative here is disgusting. Yeah, it says, for such a thing ought not to be done. I guess I'm glad they made that clear. It's better than other parts of the book where horrible things happen and there is no context given about this being bad or unacceptable. So I guess I shouldn't complain. But just the way they write this, like the readers have to understand that raping someone is a bad thing. Okay. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The heart of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage. Make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall live with us, and the land shall be open to you. Live and trade in it, and get property in it." Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "Let me find favor with you, and whatever you say to me I will give. Put the marriage present and gift as high as you like, and I will give you whatever you ask me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife. Maybe you should have started by not raping her first." then you wouldn't have had to go through all of this crap. Maybe you should have started with something that was, I don't know, about 42 steps below rape. But hey, what do I know? The sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully, because he had defiled their sister Dinah. They said to them, "We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we consent to you, that you will become as we are, and every male among you be circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters for ourselves, and we will live among you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and be gone." You'll see that they're going somewhere with this. But it's still kind of gross to think that they are bargaining that if you circumcise yourself, then you can have our sister whom you have just raped. Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the young man did not delay to do the thing because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all his family. I love how, after telling us he's a rapist and that he totally acts like an incel, then it says that Shechem was the most honored of all his family. Maybe that's true, but man, that does not say anything well for the rest of his family. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, "These people are friendly with us. Let them live in the land and trade in it, for the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters in marriage, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will they agree to live among us, to become one people, that every male among us must be circumcised as they are circumcised. Will not their livestock, their property, and all their animals be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will live among us." And all who went out of the city gate heeded Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, and all who went out of the gate of his city. So first of all, this is a social for foreskin follies, because nothing God loves more than a nice pile of foreskin. This is also a double social, because here I am calling this another instance of jump to the shark. Why am I calling this jump to the shark? Because Shechem, the filthy little rapist, got so enamored with the girl he raped that he then decided to enter into this deal with Dinah's brothers. The deal was not just that he gets circumcised, but that all the other men in the city get circumcised too. Now, you're telling me that he went back to the city and told all the other men of the city, "Hey, this girl I just raped, and now I want to be her husband, won't let me do this unless we all get circumcised." And the men supposedly went, "Okay." Come on, man. With every male friend I've ever had, if I said to them, "Dude, I have a big sack full of $100 bills, and you can have the whole damn thing. All you have to do is cut off a piece of your penis," they would all say no. For most men I've known, there is no reward, money, land, or riches that will somehow get them to say, "Sure, cut off a piece of my penis." That is not how dudes work. And you're going to tell me every man in the city agreed to this. Why? So they could trade with Jacob and his family? Come on, man. This makes no sense. I almost think this was written by a bunch of eunuchs, or people that don't have any material down there, they don't have any equipment, because any dude who's got some junk is going to read this and go, "Come on, man. You might get Shechem to agree to this. You might get maybe a few dudes in the city to agree with this, and they think it's in their best interest. But you're not getting all the dudes to line up and get a piece of their pee-pee chopped off just so that Shechem can be married to the woman that he raped." This makes no sense, and this is completely jumping the shark. Dinah's brothers avenged their sister. On the third day, when they were still in pain, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city unawares and killed all the males. I think that's another social, ladies and gentlemen. This is another instance within a couple sentences of jumping the shark. Not only are we to believe all the men agreed to have a piece of their penis lopped off. But then 3 days later, 2 guys show up and kill all the males. Now, I understand they're trying to communicate this act of deception where Simeon and Levi got them to undergo circumcision. Now the guys are in pain and now they're helpless. And Simeon and Levi go in and slaughter all the men. But I don't care how much pain they were in. It doesn't tell us how many men were in the city. Maybe if it was a village, there were 20 or 30 men at least. If it was a city, it would be 100 or a couple hundred, who knows? But even if it's only 20 or 30 men in pain, the idea that you could slaughter all of them with no resistance, I might be in pain, but at some point it's going to become obvious that these guys are running around slaughtering people. And the guys that are in pain, even though they are in pain, would be picking up weapons and trying to defend themselves. The idea that Simeon and Levi slaughtered everyone by themselves, even knowing that all those other guys had just recently gone through circumcision, it just beggars credulity, man. It says they killed Hamor and his son Shechem with a sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. And the other sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because their sister had been defiled. They took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field. All their wealth, all their little ones and their wives, all that was in the house, they captured and made their prey. Let me read this again. All their wealth, all their little ones and their wives, all that was in the houses, they captured and made their prey. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a social for, it's a double social actually. It's a social for overkill, so drink up for overkill. And it's a social for a worthless word. I'll get to that in a second. Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me odious to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household." But they said, "Should our sister be treated like a prostitute?" Now, to our socials, I want to point out a few things. This is absolutely an instance of overkill, and it's really sad and egregious. When you read this story, the first instinct is to read this as this glorious thing of revenge, because after all, it starts off the narrative by telling us Dinah was raped, which is traumatic and should never happen to anyone. But the result of this sexual assault is that Dinah's brothers went through and murdered and pillaged everything. They murdered all the men, they pillaged all the wealth, and as for the women and the children, I don't know what we are to take of this exactly, because it says they were captured and made their prey. Prey is not a word that you normally use if you're going to capture these women and children and take them as your own, as prisoners or slaves or concubines. It says that they took all the wealth and then all their little ones and their wives, all that was in the houses, they captured and made their prey. What happened to Dinah is disgusting, but does that justify wiping out an entire city? Think about it. For most of these people in the city, the men, their only crime, I guess, is that they were dumb enough to go along with getting a piece of their dick chopped off because their asshole prince was a rapist and was in love with the person that he victimized. Their crime was to go along with the prince. And as far as the women and children, what was their crime? Why should they become prey? Should it be because they were so horrible as to live in a city where the prince is a disgusting person? Imagine you live in Washington, D.C., and the president's son does something disgusting. And as an act of revenge, someone comes in and kills you and your family, even though you have no connection to the president's son, even though you are not royalty, you are not a government official, but it doesn't matter. Because the president's son did something disgusting, this other party is going to come in and raid D.C. and kill you and your family and take all of your wealth and destroy everything that you own. How does that come near what anyone would call justice. Yet, that is what we have in Genesis chapter 30. This is some Rambo level stuff. And that sounds really fun when you're going to the movies. You know, sometimes it's great to get a big old thing of popcorn and watch some big revenge fantasy like Rambo or like Death Wish and see this guy taking care of all these other bad guys. But when this is supposedly real life, the gross injustice here is galling. For all the Christians that want to cry, this isn't prescriptive, it's just descriptive. They're just describing something that happened. Okay, so what lesson am I to take from this disgusting story? Your God couldn't be bothered to indicate whether this was good or bad or overkill or whether any part of it was justified. They're just telling us a story. And you can hide behind this descriptive label, but that is a weak dodge because this entire book is held up by people across the world who want to use it as a moral compass. You have a story where Dinah was horrifically assaulted and justice should have been done to Shechem. But this was not justice. This was disgusting overkill where innocents had their lives destroyed because Simeon and Levi wanted bloody revenge. I put this down as a case of worthless word. Here's why. There was this ruse. Simeon and Levi said, get circumcised, and then you can have our sister, and we'll intermarry with you. But circumcision is a covenant with God. They used a covenant with God as a means of slaughtering an entire city. Now, I understand these guys who all went off supposedly and got circumcisions because Shechem wanted him to. I'm sure that they were not Jews just by matter of the fact that they got circumcised. And I'm sure that they probably wouldn't have felt that they had any particular covenant in getting circumcised. Even if this did happen on any level, it only would have been so that they could please this Lord who they served under. But circumcision is specifically laid out by God to Abraham as a covenant. And the idea that you use this covenant and use it as a means to slaughter an entire city in a horrific act of unbalanced revenge, it speaks very poorly for your holy text. And the fact that nobody in here can put any type of context or any kind of story that says maybe this wasn't an ideal scenario. Maybe you shouldn't do this in your own life. The fact that God is silent is really disgusting. Genesis 35. God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and settle there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. And that is the social for split personality. We have God speaking to Jacob, telling God to make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau, which should be the same God who's talking to you right now. But hey, split personalities. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you, and purify yourselves, and change your clothes. Then come, let us go up to Bethel, that I may make an altar there to the God who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me wherever I have gone. And that is a social for polytheism. Jacob is not saying we should make an altar to God, or the only God. He's saying we should make an altar to the God who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me wherever I have gone. That is not the kind of language you use when there's only one God. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they had, and the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak that was near Shechem.
Last game,
as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities all around them, so that no one pursued them.
You may have aborted the game, but I'm going to
that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan. He and all his people who were with him. And there he built an altar